Hello everyone, this is Kerry Alfred, Media Production Specialist here at CPL, and you're listening to CPL Ignites. In this episode, CPL's Bill Greeley and Cheryl Graeub sit down to discuss the future of healthcare education. Let's start with some introductions and then we'll get into the discussion.
Hello everyone, I'm Bill Greeley. I'm a higher education project manager here at CPL.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Graeub, and I'm a senior interior design team leader here at CPL.
Why do we think there's been a significant uptick in students wanting to enroll in health professions programs, specifically programs geared towards nursing, physician assistants, radiology technicians, etc.?
One of the major things, obviously, having come out of the pandemic and COVID and all of that, we've seen sort of an influx of students take an interest in health professions. The other thing I would note too is we're seeing there's incredible growth in the health professions marketplace in terms of finding jobs once you graduate. So I think there are a couple of key factors within that, and that's a couple of reasons why we've seen that growth.
Yeah, I think a lot of students have had interest in helping people after living through the pandemic, particularly seeing how the aging population was affected by that and wanting to kind of jump into the health professions field to help out where they could.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And also, we're seeing the great opportunity in the health professions careers as well, right? There's a tremendous opportunity for growth, and we're seeing all of those health-related fields grow quite a bit. So in terms of enrollment and then finding work right after you graduate, there's a lot of potential there for students to find work.
I think that's really driving a lot of it too. Mentioning the finding work, that's a key component when you graduate. If you already know you're going to have a job as soon as you get out in your field, that's a really good, choice for profession. So I think that's driven some interest, and maybe there's some students that didn't really know what they wanted to do, but had an interest in helping people, and it's a guaranteed job when you graduate. So that's kind of a good setup for them.
Yeah, I read this interesting statistic the other day, and it was something like for every 1,000 or so Americans over the age of 65, right, the number of nurses used to be 69 like 20 years ago. And currently right now that number is 62. So, I mean, there's a lot of opportunity to fill those fields. We're actually we're working on a health professions renovation at University of Buffalo. And we were there yesterday, and even filling positions for health professions, professors and teachers, there is a true growing need for that as well. And it was one of the things as part of the project, we're looking at basically renovating space on the campus and trying to meet their growth needs from a health profession standpoint. So it truly is a growing field.
Yeah, I agree. We've even seen clients. We have one longtime client that's just creating a small sim lab in an existing building that they have just to kind of get their program going and invest in that learning space that's so critical for these fields.
How have we been helping colleges and universities respond to this uptick?
So CPL has helped our colleges and our clients really help with that uptick enrollment. And there's a couple of points to that. Number one, we've helped with expanding and building new schools of health professions. Right now we're really seeing the sort of national shortage from a physician and a nursing standpoint. And one of the things that we've seen in higher education is that expanded growth of health professions. We just completed a school of health professions at St. Bonaventure University, and that it was a brand new school, right? Brand new. There is a true need, especially in the southern tier here in Western New York, for those who want to enroll in health professions, and St. Bonaventure stepped up to fill that need.
And I think for some of our existing clients too that have schools of health professions, we've been able to help them kind of adapt to the pandemic, whether it be assisting with furniture solutions on the fly or minor millwork modifications, and kind of helping them adapt to be flexible to meet the new needs that kind of came up suddenly with the pandemic as well.
How does technology and simulated teaching fit into the fabric of health profession schools?
Yeah, I mean, from a simulation standpoint, that is really one of the areas that we have seen a lot of work and a lot of growth for simulation centers, right? In two of the last projects that we've done at Bonaventure and at the U of R, we built larger simulation centers. And for simulation centers, basically, you've got two spaces where the simulation happens, typically a center control room. And they go through scenarios with either mannequins, or it depends on, maybe there's an ER situation or something like that. And it gives the students the ability to get as close as you can to sort of real world situations. So that's a whole nother, and that deals with technology and just a whole nother realm of this kind of explosion in terms of technology and what we've seen, not only in healthcare situations, but also in health professions.
Yeah, we've done a simulation center here in North Carolina as well, in Greensboro at Union Square campus. And that was really critical for them, the variety of sim labs that we were able to do, and the flexibility even with changing the types of simulations that they did, setting up the nurse station for the real world feel and experience, and just, giving them so much flexibility. And like you said, Bill, just the technology has come so far in this profession that it gives the students a lot better opportunity to learn.
No, I totally agree. It's always been interesting to me to sort of see the health professions kind of pedagogy change over time, right? And especially when you're talking about simulation centers, that the whole notion of kind of briefing, then simulating, and then debriefing is incredibly strong, right? And that's really the way that teaching is happening in a lot of these simulation centers. What the impact that has sort of on our end is, of course, these simulation centers, number one, are getting larger, right? Require more technology. The other thing is they do need a place to actually let the briefing and the debriefing happen. So typically we try to use almost like group study rooms, right? And from a technology standpoint, you're able to actually record those sessions, and then the students are debriefed on sort of what they did with their professors in those spaces. So it's no longer just a simulation space, it's simulation and briefing and debriefing spaces that are required as well.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too how we've been able to incorporate, not only teaching the students that are using the sim lab and doing the simulations, but we've done a lot of visual interest in those areas, open glass feel, to let people that are walking by see what's going on and kind of get engaged in that. I know at Union Square, they give tours of the building a lot. And so, a lot of people have traveled to see that facility just to see the engagement that's gotten from the students by being able to see in all these spaces, and, the anatomage table that they have there, and truly being able to feel like they're interacting with an actual patient and just learning so much from that. So I think the technology is cool.
That's so true, right? Putting technology on display, especially with the simulation centers or virtual anatomy lab, is one of the key priorities of projects that we work on if they have those sort of components with it, right? These spaces are expensive, and colleges and universities really want to put those spaces on display, and it has become a great recruitment tool for them as well. 20 years ago or 15 years ago, those would have been just solid walls, but now they want that sort of front and center, and they want everyone, especially on the tour, to be able to see that.
Yeah, I think that's really important. At Union Square too, with the community engagement piece, part of the team was really interesting because we also teamed up with a local healthcare entity. And so they were invested in the facility as well, and invested in making sure the development of the people that would be coming to work for them was good. And they also, rent out some of the spaces. And so there's a lot of interaction within the community there in that facility. And I think we do that at a lot of our facilities, where we really make sure the community stays engaged and invested in what we're doing, and making sure there's a good outcome for the students as well.
That's great.
What does CPL's approach look like in terms of helping schools capitalize on growth in enrollments?
So from a sort of higher education perspective, right, with CPL and being able to respond to this growth, one of the things that we really do internally, right, is we look to partner with our clients, right, and we're really looking to be a trusted advisor with them. That's especially true when you're talking about health professions projects, especially when you are trying to grow basically a new project from scratch from health professions. You know, at St. Bonaventure, they didn't have a school of health professions before this. So to be their trusted advisor, not only from a campus perspective, right? And one of the things we did there is we looked at multiple options. Do you renovate a building? Do you build new? If so, how much square feet would you just need to build the spaces that you currently don't have on campus, like simulation centers or like a skills lab, let's say. So, you know, from our end, from a higher education standpoint, our clients were always looking to create those partnerships and help guide them through that process.
I think we've done that from an interiors perspective as well. I think we just partner with the client, see what the need is, see what we're able to fit in, whether it's in an existing building or if it needs a new building. But, you know, I mentioned earlier, we're looking at even just carving out small sim labs with little control rooms, or, you know, whether it be the new materials we're looking at interiors wise to respond again to the pandemic, the latest concerns about germs and things. Really just partnering with them, addressing their concerns, helping them to address their needs, and what the best bang for their buck is as they evaluate their different options.
One of the items within that, right, which is how are we assisting our clients? And one of the things we always try to do is, number one, we'll benchmark, right? We'll go through a series of benchmarking. So whether that's aspirational from their standpoint, whether those are aspirational schools or whether they're local schools or whatever, we're always going through a series of benchmarking exercises with them to show them sort of what other schools are doing, you know, what's happening, whether they're expanding, look at enrollments, things like that. And there's a whole series of trends that we're seeing in health professions, everything from more collaborative spaces, right? Yeah. What's really happening in the real world healthcare situation scenario is we're seeing team-based learning and team-based working happening in that clinical setting. And now we're seeing the incorporation of teams in terms of what's happening in a health professions learning environment as well. Now that's meant, you know, we've seen spaces and sizes grow, but from our end, it's our responsibility to sort of create spaces where students can learn in teams, right? Whether that's additional of group study rooms or whether that is larger classrooms that are able to break down into smaller situations in a smaller setting to be able to work in groups, or whether that's a multi-purpose room where students are able to gather maybe after class or they're able to sort of get together before class and work out those group scenarios that they need to. So from our end, incorporating those spaces and talking to schools about those trends that we're seeing out there becomes critical.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to offer that flexibility. You mentioned, Bill, all the different types of those spaces that we provide. We often provide all of those all on one project because it just gives them so much more flexibility. You know, students aren't just learning right there in the classroom. They're breaking out into small groups. They're sitting in a lounge setting, talking while they have a bite to eat in the cafe. And so just offering that flexibility of options and not limiting it to just the classroom setting. And I think the active learning has been a key part of that too. Setting up classrooms in an active learning setup where they have the technology that they can connect to the screen. They're in smaller groups, flexible furniture that you can move around and interact with different teams of people. I think that's really important to get the dynamic that they're going to see in the professional setting as well.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. You know, it's always interesting to me, and it's one of the things that we kind of push for, right? Whenever you have closed collaborative spaces, space for students to get together, if we're working on sort of a larger project, we strive to hit 7 to 12% or so of the space within the program that's going to be put in the building to be those kinds of spaces like that, even if it's as simple as sort of carving out an area along the corridor for students to gather, or even like a space between two spaces. I always refer to as that sort of space between, right? And providing areas for students to sort of gather in those spaces too. When we worked on the health professions project at Bonaventure, it was critical for them to get those spaces in the project. And their dean was very instrumental in terms of pushing us to get those spaces in. The interesting thing about that project is it is actually located in an old seminary, right? A historic building on the campus, which was incredibly underutilized. So and we had studied putting it over up towards the academic core as a new building and maybe supplementing with some classroom spaces in another building. But ultimately, they made the decision to put it in Francis Hall, which is on more of a residential side of the campus. And so because of that, right, students are spending long hours and professors are spending long hours in those spaces. So they thought it was, and the dean really pushed because it was critical to have those decompression spaces right within the new floor plan.
That's similar to what we did at Union Square as well. Union Square has a lot of students that are there all day. They're not going back and forth to their various campuses because Union Square was a collaboration with multiple entities and multiple schools. So it was a challenge to have that off campus, whereas on campus, they have some of these other spaces already. And so it was very intentional on that project as well. The client really wanted to be sure those spaces were at the forefront of our minds as we developed that space planning and floor plan, just to make sure the students had that space that they could decompress and be there all day and then not have to feel like they had to leave to go get a bite to eat or take a break or relax. They had all of that kind of included in the building. So I think that was important there as well.
Yeah, that's great.
What other creative solutions do we bring to higher ed clients who might have limited on-campus space to work with?
The other area that we're seeing and really trying to help our clients with too is looking for instances where we can find synergies within spaces. In other words, can a group study room also function as another function during the day? And one of the things that we did on a project was the group study rooms actually are also the debriefing rooms. So after hours and when they're not in use, students are able to sign out the group study rooms and actually use those for group study. In another scenario, right, we had at U of R, they wanted to incorporate these experiential learning labs within the project and then have an adjacent classroom. And as we began to sort of study this, we combined the two. Right? Not only does that save on space requirements, but also saves on budget. And the idea there was by making those CLR rooms, which is basically an exam room, by making those a little larger and having a dividing wall between them with the doors that open and close, you're able to meet your classroom goals, right? But then also have the smaller, the ability to shut the doors and have the smaller ELR rooms as well. So looking for opportunities to sort of double up on spaces can be important for clients.
Yeah, I think that's great. We did that at Union Square also. We had a 100-person classroom that was able to be divided in half, but we also looked at the option for that to open onto the main corridor. So if there were events and it needed to kind of flow as reception space, that there was an opportunity to kind of open up that wall. And we did end up having that in the project so that they have that kind of free-flowing option for those events. But on a day-to-day basis, it can be in a classroom setup. And it also allows for more flexibility with the community engagement pieces that they do there. We have a 350-seat auditorium, so that's a nice sort of catering setup for them. Or, when those spaces get rented out, it kind of allows a lot of flexibility.
Yeah. Cheryl, just so you know, we use that image of that space all the time in our presentations because it's so powerful, right? It talks about corridor spaces. It talks about classroom, right, where you can see into the image with the glass doors that fold. So, I mean, even finding spaces like that, it really engages the corridor into and gives it almost like a different meaning, right? Because now you have the ability to take that classroom, open up to the corridor, but then also at the same time have a much larger function with the classroom and the corridor. And it provides just a whole litany of needs. It's a really powerful image.
Yeah, part of engaging that corridor too, we ended up connecting that corridor kind of all the way through the building. And that was intentional as well to kind of give a community facing entrance. And we did a history wall kind of at that end to sort of engage. And we kind of paired that with the student lounge space so that there was always some activity going on at that end of the building. And then you had at the other end the free flowing classroom out into the corridors. So the client really wanted there to be a lot of activity in the corridor, to have a large width corridor, to have some of that gathering space that they needed.
Yeah, it's interesting at St. Bonaventure University. One of the things that they required as part of their program was a very large gathering space. And because we were working with a historic building, there was a chapel. It was actually an old seminary. There, it had everything in it. So it had a dining hall, it had residences, it had a chapel, it had a gym, it had all these spaces within it. So we utilized the chapel and made that into a multi-purpose space. And that gave the school the ability not only to have large functions, but it also it also acts almost as the living room for the building itself, right? When it's not being used for functions or for lectures or to have guest speakers come in, it's being used as student collaboration spaces, right? So we selected furniture that really not only could be quickly rearranged but easily moved, but at the same time allowed for large functions and small group settings, and it's become a very effective sort of tool for them in terms of meeting the needs of the School of Health Professions and the larger St. Bonaventure community as well.
From project kickoff to final completion, how does our process ensure the client's vision is achieved?
In terms of process, right, and I'm always kind of very interested in process, especially when it comes to health professions projects. There are ultimately, we interact with our clients kind of the same way, right? Even if it's a large renovation or a small renovation. We meet with them through a series of user group meetings, right? That helps us kind of develop a program or a list of spaces, basically, and then we begin to diagram with them. Now, there are many different ways we can do this with clients. Number one is we can have a design charrette, and that's kind of the way that we did it at the U of R and at at St. Bonaventure, through a series of user group meetings or the design charrette, where you're basically doing everything from drawing right in front of them to getting their input to doing, you can go through a whole list of sort of exercises to get as much information for the project as necessary. And then in some cases, one of the things we'll wind up doing then is continuing those kind of user group meetings, not only through schematic design, but through design development and then into construction documentation. So there's that constant going back and forth. Our clients are included along every kind of step of the way. So there is a constant communication between us and them. As an example, at Bonaventure, we work very closely with Dean Pisano, and he was the primary driver of the school. And it was interesting only because at the time there was no school, right? He was basically creating this kind of as we went along. That did pose challenges in terms of programming and planning, but quite often we'd have to go back and take a step back once people and professors came on board and sort of review kind of each step that we took to reveal kind of where we were right now. But typically, a typical process is very collaborative. We always are very open to input, right? That's the important thing. This is not our building, it's theirs. So, but that's pretty much is kind of typical process that we would go through.
Yeah, I agree. The collaboration's so important. And I think we do a good job of, like you said, Bill, just checking in with them along every step of the way. It's a very interactive process back and forth, whether it's doing a visual dialogue process or showing them some renderings or even a VR walkthrough. We really try to find the best way to convey their vision really and work with them towards enunciating that properly and giving them what they want to see. So I think that's really critical.
And our last question, what do we want our clients to know about our work in the health profession space?
I think what we really want our clients to know in this space is we're really invested just along with them in the whole process and the whole project. Every project is unique. Every project is important to us. And we really come alongside them and form that team to really execute their vision and collaborate with them all along the way. And we are flexible in the way that we approach that and the way that we implement it.
No, Cheryl, I think you're spot on with that. I think the other thing to think about too, from a client perspective, is really from our end, right? It's about working through, and it's about meeting their challenges and understanding what their needs are, right? And having the ability to sort of envision, how we can solve their problems as well, which I think becomes really critical for client engagement. The other thing just to think about in terms of CPL, right? That we are truly we can do every facet of these health professions projects, right? We bring a credible knowledge of the trends that are out there right now, right? We have a lot of experience in terms of working on health professions projects, so we bring really, and that's across the Northeast, right, and the Southeast as well. We have done quite a few health professions projects, so we do bring a lot of knowledge base with this too.
Yeah, I think that's an important reason clients choose us because we have a vast knowledge across the entire company and we can bring that to their project and then make it unique for them.
Yeah, the other thing is we are truly a full service firm. And at Bonaventure, one of the things that we did, we started with schematic design and pre-design. We can do programming, planning, engineering, architecture, site civil. We had also we're part of the FF&E and some furniture selection team. We even did the signage. So we are truly full service.
And I think that's important to fully implement the design throughout the whole project, the full executing of the vision and not just doing part of it. Getting the full package is really important for that final last step of the project.
Thank you everyone for joining us today, and we look forward to bringing you more enlightening discussions here on CPL Ignites.
Cheryl, thank you very much. This has been great. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your time, Bill.